Daniel chapter 11. This is not exactly the chapter I wanted to be on when I had to spend so much time trying to wrap up studying for Friday night, as I taught at the men's conference Friday night. This is how wound up I was. I was just excited about being able to getting asked to teach at the men's conference. I thought we were all teaching on the life of Paul, all three of us. So as I was preparing, I'm like, Lord, man, I can't be all over the place like this. I'm going back and forth. I mean, there's only 13 of his own books that he wrote, plus Acts to cover, for the life of Paul and show a changed life, right? So we get up there and we go down by the lake to pray before we start the services up in the chapel, and Roger says that, Glenn's going to teach on Paul, and Rick's going to teach on Moses, and Tom's going to teach on Peter. And I'm like, what? So I talked to him later. I said, man, when I got your text, all I saw was that I was teaching on Friday. He said, well, I said, told you guys, everybody. I said, I must have just been so excited when I saw it. All I saw was Glenn Friday, and that's all I saw. I didn't see everything else. I said, so, you have set me free. So I get in front of the guys. I said, we only got 14 books we got to cover tonight now, so let's go. We'll be here. And it's Friday night, so I don't have to worry about running into anybody else. I can go as long as I want to. I didn't, but I could have. This chapter is probably the most disputed chapter, or the least liked chapter of the critics of the Bible, and especially Daniel, because it is so specific. In the first 35 verses, I think I mentioned last week, there are 100 to 135 different prophecies that have already been fulfilled concerning the kings that would come and progress and come after, or basically how the Persian Empire would end, the rise of the Roman Empire, and then again, to finish off the last of the chapter, we're going to talk about the Antichrist again too. So bear with me. I literally wish I could have just printed off somebody's commentary that has all this down here and just read it to you, because it's kind of all it's going to be. So if you don't like history, go get another cup of coffee, I guess. But this is right, exactly. But what this does speak to, guys, is the accuracy of Bible prophecy. All of it's very accurate. All of it, God doesn't just kind of shoot out near misses through his prophets, or close, where we can look at a prophecy and say close enough to count. If that's all we can say about any particular prophecy in the Bible, this is close enough to have meant that, and we can't say it specifically meant that, then we need to leave it alone and let it go for a little while longer. Right? So, and we talk a lot about prophecy. We're going to talk about some more tonight. We'll probably watch the pastor from Hawaii again tonight do his prophecy update. But in most of my lifetime, at least when I've been old enough to understand and begin to understand the Bible, there's been a lot of, this is the direction that we're heading. This is where things are going to be. And look how it's all forming up. And we would see the major players of prophecy for today would come to the forefront, but then they would back off again. And then it would come to the forefront again, and then it would back off again. But I think last week I mentioned to you guys, they're not coming up and backing off now. The alliances that have needed to be made in Ezekiel 38 have been made. They are in play in the Middle East. We are backing out. Russia has moved its nukes into Iran. We've moved ours out of Turkey. We do not have the influence there that we had even 6 months ago. Definitely not the influence we had a year and a half ago. So anything we do, we have to ask Russia's and Iran's permission before we do anymore. But that is the setting. That's the setting for Ezekiel 38 and 39, for Isaiah 17. Those things are in, not even just, I wouldn't even say they're in play. They are moving forward now. Right? Everything that they need, all the technology that they need. Listen, when you guys see things about technology that is up and coming, it's already there. It's already completed. It is literally an overnight decision to make, and we've been seeing everything is progressing super fast. I've been pointing that out, right? You have all of a sudden Great Britain pulls out of the EU, Germany's talking about pulling out, and the EU wants to reorganize. You have Russia and Turkey, who couldn't get along 6 months ago, now are best friends, working in the Middle East, moving into Syria. Turkey has troops in Syria now. We barely have a presence in Syria anymore. That's important because the destruction of Damascus is one of the next things that'll happen. And we'll see it happen. You know, in the meantime, we have, even in our own country, just what, yesterday? Was it yesterday or Friday? We had the bombings in Manhattan. Yesterday. So, and I haven't even seen all the details of that yet. I don't even know how that's all played out. Maybe we'll look at that tonight too. But in with all of that, one thing I learned in the Air Force, because while I was in the Air Force, I worked for the a test wing where we did test and development stuff, is that by the time the public sees any technology we have, it's already obsolete as far as the military is concerned. It's already old technology. So what we see is this amazing, right, new airplanes that can, they're already working on something new and developing it, and it's coming fast. And the stuff that you see is brand new is already old to the military and to the people who are building it. So when you see things about money and economics and how are we going to turn this into one world power and how are we going to turn this into one economy, it's already set, guaranteed. The little blips, the little things that you get, the little pieces of information that you get are just to get you conditioned to be ready to accept it on the day they want it to be done. It won't be a long up and coming thing. I saw something about, you know, the whole economic stuff. I think Joy posted something about the Bitcoins and the TED Talk thing. And I was looking at that. And the one thing that the woman, when I watched that video, kept saying is, this is coming. We're not there yet. It's going to take a while before we get there. It won't take a while. When they decide it's time, they'll push the button somewhere and it'll be done. You know, it's already in place. It just needs the right formation of the powers to be there, and the right person to be there, and it'll be overnight. One of the things we'll see in Daniel chapter 12 is the speed with which things in the end begin to happen. That information happens a lot faster, and we've always pointed to that and say, look how fast we're developing medically, look how fast we're developing technology, look how fast. I think it means more than that. I think it means look how fast the end is going to come. To us, it's going to be like sudden. And we're seeing it now, you know. Again, overnight, Britain pulls out. Overnight, Russia and Turkey are getting along. You know, it's things we never thought, unless the Lord came back. In fact, I'll go out on a limb and say things that I'm seeing now I thought could happen after the rapture. So they're happening now. You know, I don't know how the world would organize and have the attack from the north happen. A lot of prophecy scholars have been saying in the past 20 years that can happen before or after the rapture. And I've always been the guy that's going like, you know what, I kind of would like to be here when it happens because I want to see how God actually defends, because he's the one that defends Israel. Not us, not anybody else. God does it. It's going to be a supernatural thing. That'd be kind of cool to see. I'm not going to care when I'm in heaven if it happens after I go. But right now on this side of it, I'm like, you know, I can hang out for another day or two and watch that happen and just see what God does. It'd be cool, right? I'm weird, I guess. Anyways, now let's look at some things that have already happened. We're seeing a lot of things that have happened in our time, in our day. We'll talk about them again tonight. But these things, and I've written them down to the best of my ability. I would challenge you, because you're not going to get 135 prophecies out of me today. All right, we're not going to get that nitpicky. But I would challenge you to get and look up the history of these countries and how they developed and how they came to power. And you're going to see how this all, you can take the history books and set them next to Daniel chapter 11, and it's so specific and so much that the critics argue that this could not have possibly been written 200 years prior. It had to have been written after it was all done. The problem is they can't throw out the rest of the book of Daniel. And the other problem is now we've had some archaeological discoveries that show us that Daniel is the whole book prior to what they say. Because literally you would have had to write some of this stuff in Jesus' time to be able to say it was written after it was done. Because we're going to see the Romans start coming into play here. But anyways, let's just get on to it. And I don't know that we'll make it through the whole chapter. We'll get probably through the whole of what I know. If we go beyond that, it's going to be probably my guess, or it's going to be something that you guys are just going to have to look up. And the commentaries are full of them. If you get John Corson's commentary, he's got it all pretty basically lined out. If you can go online and listen to like Joe Fost, he was going through it. David Guzik, he was going through it. So I just wrote as fast as I could in the little bit of time that I gave myself. So it was a little bit of a panic when I realized on Friday, as I was going through my stuff for the men's conference for the last time, that I hadn't spent any time for Sunday. So here we are. So, Lord, it's all on you. I got nothing. All right. So chapter 11, verse 1 says, also in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. Now we're going back to there's no chapter break when Daniel's writing this, all right? So we're going back to the angel that's talking to Daniel. Remember last week, he has the vision and he sees, I believe, sees Jesus in his glorified state. And then an angel has to come and strengthen him and talk to him, and he's beginning to talk to him, and he's told him he's going to, when he's done there, he goes back to fight with the prince of Persia again. We talked about the demonic realm, the angelic realm, or however you, spiritual realm, however you want to label it. He's going to go back and fight with the prince of Persia, which is a demon that was over the government. And then after that, he was going to be fighting with the prince of Greece, who is the next world power to come. And how Michael was going to be, and he said, Michael, your prince, which in my mind says that Michael is over Israel. But how Michael would be the one to help him to keep these countries at bay from completely destroying Israel. Because they did. Both of them, the Persians and the Greeks, both tried to destroy Israel altogether. Haman, if you go to the book of Esther, his plot to destroy all of Israel, all the Jews, that's what that's all about. He was part of the Persian Empire. And then the Greeks also would do the same after. When we get to Antiochus Epiphanes at the end of the Persian, or the end of the Greek Empire. But anyways, verse 2 says, and now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than all of them, or than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he is arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not among his posterity, nor according to his dominion with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be uprooted, even for others besides these. All right, so we're starting off with Persia. He doesn't spend a whole lot of time with Persia. But he's telling Daniel there's 3 more kings. So if you have Cyrus in control at the time. You have 3 more kings to come after them. You have Cambyses, who reigned from 529 to 522. Then you have, let's see if I can say his name right, Sirius, or Sirius, anyways. Basically, this guy was a fraud. So there's actually, if you look, one of the commentators I was looking at, and I forgot to write the other name down, but there's another king. So it would look like there's 5. But they don't take this guy, seems to be excluded, this pseudo-Syrian guy, or whatever his name is. He only ruled for 1 year, but he was a fraud. He wasn't really supposed to be in line for the kingdom. He had fooled the people into believing that he was one of the direct heirs, but he wasn't. And when they found out, they dealt with him. So then you had Darius the First, I think, 521 to 485. He was the first one to face the Greeks as far as trying to overthrow the Greeks or conquer the Greeks. And then you have Xerxes, or Ahasuerus. He's the king from the book of Esther. He's the one that would marry Esther. He would field an army of 2 million men. We don't fight with an army of 2 million men. He would field an army with 2 million men and a navy and try to go after the Greeks and be defeated. The Greeks defeated him in Thermopylae, in another city also, but Thermopylae was one of the bigger battles. So he's turned back. Then you have Alexander the Great. That's verse 3, the mighty king that shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. We've already talked about this before. There's been some other pictures of really both of these empires, but especially Alexander the Great, and how his says the mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he is arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided toward 4 winds of heaven. So he conquers the world very fast. From 20 to 30 years old, he's done. All the known world is conquered. So great and so fierce is his army that when he comes to a city, even one that has a wall, and they just come out and surrender. They get to the border of India, I think it is, and his army's like, why are we even going? Nobody's going to fight us. The army just wants to quit because nobody will fight. Can you imagine that? You're such a, your identity is so much of being a warrior that when there's no fight, then why bother doing this anymore? They're there for the fight. That's what they're there to do. So they don't even go into India. But that's how fierce he was. So then he dies 32 years old, and he gets drunk. He goes out and ends up in the rain, in the bad weather, gets sick, and dies, lamenting that there was nothing left, nobody else for him to conquer at 32 years old. And we talked about that. We conquer the world in video games by 32 years old, but that's it. It doesn't mean anything, right? Your thumbs are sore, but that's all you've done. And then you just wait another 6 months or whatever it is for another game to come out. His kingdom is split up into 4, and we talked about those. His 4 generals end up taking him. It says here that it won't go to his posterity. Everybody who would have been, or anybody who could have been in line behind Alexander the Great, as far as family members or any of that, they were all murdered. They had all been taken out. They tried, there were a couple of them that tried to take over, but they were murdered. They were put down. And so it went to his 4 generals that he had over his army. So the 2 you want to focus on here are the Seleucid and the Ptolemies. Let me get them right. The Ptolemies go into the southern portion of the kingdom. They take over Egypt, and so they're the kings of the south. And then you have the Seleucid, who takes over Syria, and most of the time is laying claim to Israel and the land in between Egypt and Syria. And so these 2 are going to go back and forth, we're going to see now. All right, so verse 5, also the king of the south shall be become strong, as well as one of his princes, and he shall gain power over him and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. And at the end of some years they shall join forces, for the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain her power, or the power of her authority. Neither shall he nor his authority stand, neither he nor his authority shall stand, but she shall be given up with those who brought her, and with him who begot her, and with him who strengthened her in those times. All right, so basically they're going to come together, they're going to make an agreement. And the Ptolemy goes to Antiochus and says, hey, we need to, take my daughter, marry my daughter, and that way we're just one big, huge, happy family. We're one big kingdom. We'll rule this together kind of deal. They're making a peace agreement with daughters. So Antiochus is like, I can't do that. I'm married. And Ptolemy says, get rid of your wife, marry my daughter. And so he agrees to do it. But shortly after that Ptolemy dies. So Antiochus decides he wants his original wife back, so he gains her back. She kills off Ptolemy's daughter. And again, the war is back on between the two. So that's basically the description of what happens right there. Says, but from a branch of her, verse 7, from a branch from her roots, one shall arise in his place, who shall come with an army, enter the fortress of the king of the north, and deal with them and prevail. So that's Ptolemy III. Says, and he shall also carry their gods captive to Egypt with their princes and their precious articles of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Now keep in mind, in all this time, Israel is the path these two armies are trampling through. So Israel is kind of subject to all this. If there's going to be raiding parties on the way to Egypt, then the king of the north is going to be raiding Israel. And if there's raiding parties on the way to the north, it's going to go the same way. So anyways, so Ptolemy III comes up. He raises an army. He goes and attacks the north. When he goes to attack the north, and it says here he carries away their gods. Antiochus, when he came to Egypt, had taken 2,500 of the Egyptian gods and taken them back. And we've seen this all through Daniel. The kings would do that. They would raid the temples. They would take the idols. They would take the things of worship, articles of worship, and take them back. It's showing that they not only conquered the people, but they conquered their gods. So when Ptolemy III came up, he basically rescued 2,500 of his gods. When you got to rescue your own god, that doesn't speak a whole lot for your God. And when you got to rescue 2,500 of them, that doesn't show you have any way to even make a decision about who you should worship anyways. So anyways, he comes back. He takes those gods back to Egypt. That's what that is all about. But we know that that was part of the spoil of him conquering the king of the north. All right, so then also, verse 9. Also the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the south, but shall return to his own land. However, his sons shall stir up strife and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overwhelm and pass through. Then he shall return to his fortress and stir up strife. So there's all basically what we're saying here is that, and it did for a period of time. They just went back and forth. This was a huge rivalry. This was 1 year or one time this one would win, the next time this one would win. They would go back and forth. Again, they're trampling over Israel. In fact, in verse 9, when it says the king of the north comes against the king of the south, but shall return to his own land, he's just pushed back. He doesn't really conquer. But on his way back, he claims Israel as part of his dominion now. So, I didn't come down, I didn't conquer Egypt, but you know what? I'm not going to go home empty-handed, so we're going to claim Israel as ours. And nobody really objects too much to it. But again, what you see common there is they stir up strife. Everything is stirring up strife. Everything is stirring the pot. There is no rest. There's no peaceful talk. There's nothing but anxiety in the kingdoms that are fighting with one another. There is nothing but anxiety in all of the known world at that time. Does it sound familiar? There's nothing but anxiety right now. This is the same kind of thing. We're all stirring the pot. One day Putin's stirring the pot, the next day Hillary's stirring the pot, the next day Obama is stirring the pot, the next day Donald Trump is stirring the pot, the next day the Syrians are stirring the pot, then the Turks, and then, every once in a while Netanyahu says, hey, we're still here, and we're all back and forth, and we're all trampling over Israel. It's the same deal. It's the same plan. Nothing's changed in the way that we deal with Israel. And all of this is not so centered around oil as we think it is, or who's going to control the Middle East. All of this is centered around one little bitty country in the middle of it all. All of it. It all is. And we can't get away from it. A country that's smaller than most of our states. And if you look on a map, it struck me as a kid, when you look on a map, how small the United States is compared to other countries. We're not even the biggest country in North America. Landmass wise anyways. But, yet we're the proudest, we're the most boastful, we're maybe even now the most anti-God in North America anyways. And but we're doing nothing but pulling away from Israel. Everybody is either backing up or making the move to move in. And we can talk about Syria all we want to. And Syria is a major player, obviously, and Syria is the focal point for right now because Damascus has got to be wiped out. But Israel is the focal point of everybody in the world. Anybody that has any kind of government that has any kind of influence at all is focused on Israel. I would bet that if we started researching the governments of South America, we would find the same thing. We don't pay attention to them. I mean, how many of you see any of the governments in South America as anything but third world countries? I mean, some of them down there have stronger economies than we do. And they have better economies. They're really economically better places to go and move to and live in. But all we think about, all I ever thought about growing up was where all the drugs came from. They came up from South America. Drugs and alpacas. So alpacas. And the alpacas carry the drugs. I don't. That's it. But I've told you there are many countries in South America that actually belong as secondary members to the European Union. And with the EU so focused on Israel, that makes them, by proxy, focused on Israel. And certainly you have China, and you've got a distraction in North Korea that makes us think that all of Asia is looking at North Korea, but they're not. Everybody is feeding into the Middle East. Everybody, including North Korea, is feeding into the Middle East. So, again, from day to day, it just looks like we're just trampling on Israel, but there's more to it than that. All right, so verse 11. It says, "And the king of the south shall be moved with rage and go out and fight with him, with the king of the north, who shall muster a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into the hand of his enemy. And when he has taken away the multitude, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cast down tens of thousands, but he will not prevail." So these kings are just amassing bigger and bigger armies. which is amazing to me. How do you go into battle, you lose a lot of people, you come home and you amass another massive, bigger than before army to go and attack the other guy again? We talk about how overpopulated our world is right now, which is a ridiculous lie, to be honest with you. You know, we have cities in our nation that are so big that if you gave everybody 1 square foot, the entire population of the world could stand in their own square foot in that one city. Landmass wise, we are nowhere near overpopulated. Nowhere near. And the fact that we can't feed everybody is another ridiculous lie that we just use to control governments and whatever else. But these people, in a time when we don't think the world was that populated, they keep amassing armies bigger than the ones we put together and go to war with now. You know, China maybe could amass an army this big in the millions. We don't have that. On November 15th, Michigan will have a stronger, a bigger armed force out in the woods chasing deer than all of the United States armed forces put together. And that's no lie. I'm not exaggerating. We'll have more men and women armed on November 15th than all of the United States military put together. And that's just one state. Wisconsin will have a deer season that'll have a big army. Indiana, Illinois. Is there any wonder why they want to disarm us? You know? You don't defeat an army like that unless you start bombing your own people. I'm not suggesting anything, so if anybody's listening, take any ideas from me, but how in the world, that's the thing that's blowing my mind. How in the world is a man, even when the people are forced under you, how does he put together, and it was men. We're talking some of these armies, 2 million men, not 2 million women and men, 2 million men. How do you see, how does that happen? And yet we're worried about overpopulation now. I mean, unless you want to look at this as population control back then, I don't know. But where did they all come from? Their conquering of the world only went so far. Where did everybody come from? I don't know. Anyways. It's amazing. We one of the pastors that taught this weekend, God had led him to focus, at least for part of his sermon, on abortion. And Tracy said, at a men's conference, you're talking about abortion? Yeah, we're talking about abortion. We should be the voice against that. It shouldn't be just the women fighting it out. Right? In our country, we kill off an army every year before they can get out of the womb. And listen, that's just our country. Russia does the same thing. China is finally stopping doing theirs because they're realizing they don't have a next generation even coming up. That's how many they were killing off. Other nations are in trouble because their death rate is higher than their birth rate. And abortion contributes to that. Israel does the same thing that we do. It's all abortion on demand. Is it any wonder in this time when we do that, without care, without a conscience, any wonder that God said, I've had enough? Just on that one moral issue alone. That's enough, I believe, to cause him to say, enough is enough. There is no innocence left in the world. Because you won't even let it get out of the womb. So here we have these guys, massive armies, back and forth. I think we left off at verse 14. It says, now in those times many will arise up against the king of the south. Also violent men of your own people shall exalt themselves in fulfillment of the vision, but they shall fail. So not only is the king of the south having to fight the king of the north, but he also has conspirators within his own country that are trying to overthrow him. That's what that's saying. And, you know, we know that that happened. But they failed. So the king of the north shall come and build a siege mound and take a fortified city, and the forces of the south shall not withstand him. Even his choice troops shall have no strength to resist. But he who comes against him shall do according to his own will, and no one shall stand against him. He shall stand in the glorious land with destruction in his power. I believe that we're talking about, well, it's one of the Antiochus. I don't think it's Epiphanes yet, but these guys just kept, Antiochus is as much a title as it is a name. So this is one of the Antiochus guys. So and remember, the glorious land is Israel. And this guy is not, he's not satisfied with conquering the king of the north. Now he's going to focus power, he's going to focus destruction that's in his hand. He's going to focus it on Israel too, on the glorious land, it says. And he shall set his face to enter with strength, the strength of his whole kingdom, and uproot, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of women to destroy it, but she shall not stand with him or be for him. And after this he shall turn his face to the coastlands and shall take many, but a ruler shall bring the reproach against them to an end, and with the reproach removed, he shall turn back on him. So Antiochus sends his daughter to the king of the south, to the Ptolemies. It is, for all intents and purposes, fairly peaceful, just in that they're not fighting right now. Sends his daughter to the Ptolemies to spy. Says, you know, you have a son, I have a daughter, your son's not old enough to marry yet, but I'm going to take my daughter, she'll come down, she'll live with you, and when he's old enough, they'll marry. That daughter is Cleopatra. She was the one that was sent down to spy on Egypt, actually falls in love and refuses then, as it says here, refuses to be the spy, refuses to be the one within. She won't stand with her father. It says, after this he will turn his face to the coastlands, that's actually the Greek islands, and shall take many, and he does. He takes a lot of them, but when he gets to the northern islands, he runs into the Romans, and he can't defeat the Romans. So now the Romans are beginning to come on the scene, and this next empire is starting to build some strength and be an influence in the world, and he cannot defeat the Romans. It says, then he is to turn his face toward the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. So he ends up dying in one of the temples of his god. He goes back to his own land, try to rule and reign from there, but he goes into one of his own temples and he dies in the temple. So the next Antiochus that arrives, we'll see here, imposes a tax. This one that has died in his own temple has made so many military excursions, has tried to, you know, has caused so many wars, stirred up so much strife that he's in debt. So this is where he's talking about he's beginning to stumble. He doesn't have the strength that he used to have. He's in debt. He can't even pay for his wars anymore. When he goes into the temple, he dies. The next one who's in line that takes his position sends out 1,000, or says he's going to send out 1,000 tax collectors into the whole realm of the people and tax the people. So somebody poisons him. Evidently nobody likes to pay taxes, not even back then. They slip him some poisonous mushrooms, and that's how they kill him. So it says, there will arise, verse 20, there will arise one in his place, one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom, again, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, but not in anger or in battle. So that's what I'm saying. He was somebody within, poison demon took him out. There was no battle. He didn't die, with honor in battle or some, glorious way. He just, poisoned. So verse 21 says, and in his place shall arise a vile person, to whom they will not give the honor of royalty, but he shall come in peaceably and seize the kingdom by intrigue. With the force of a flood they shall be swept away from before him and be broken, and also the prince of the covenant. And after the league is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, for he shall come up and become strong with the small number of people. This is Antiochus Epiphanes. We've already talked about him in one of the earlier chapters. It says he's a vile person, but they won't give him the honor of royalty, but he is, because he's a great orator, because he comes, again, peacefully. He's a smooth talking guy is basically what it is. He convinces everybody that he is the one who's next in line for the king, for being king. Remember, when we looked at him earlier, in the earlier chapters, he is the picture of the Antichrist to come. And as you read that even just the few verses that we just read, he's going to come in with the force of a flood. They shall be swept away from before him and be broken. Before they know it, before they even get it, he's in control. It even says here, with a small number of people, he's in control. And not only is he just in control because they've given and handed it over to him with words of peace and deceitful peace, when he gets that control, now they find themselves broken. They find themselves underfoot, under his control. He is a wicked, evil man. And again, it's going to be the same way. We're going to have people that they're ready to hand over all the power to one person to try to straighten out this world. And it's already coming. It's already coming. We've been hearing for months now how the Republican Party would love to find a way to get rid of Donald Trump. Now you have the Democrat Party wants to get rid of Hillary. And you have her vice president going, I'll do it. I'll take her place. If I was her, I'd be like, it's time to get me a new running mate. It's insane what's happening. It's insane. It's insane that the president or prime minister, whatever his title is, of Turkey would just in a short amount of time go to Putin and say, whatever you want me to do. And I'm not saying Putin is the Antichrist. I don't believe he is. But there's one like these guys that's coming. We did this with the president we have now. He stepped out of Chicago. Nobody knew who he was. He made a speech at the Democrat convention. Still nobody really knew who he was. And there were a few people who were saying, yeah, watch that guy. Somebody better watch that guy. And sure enough, 4 years later, he's our president. Never voted on anything in Congress. Nobody knew where he stood. He could get up there and he could deliver a slick speech, and they all were, hey, look at hope and change. And we got what we asked for. Without the hope. We got lots of change when we got no hope. And now we have these two running. And again, one of the guys this weekend pointed out, out of 300 million people in this country, how do we end up with these two to vote for? Except for that, this is God's judgment on this country because we've turned away from him. And we got what we asked for. And I agree. He was right. So now you have this. So my point there is that the world is ripe for one man to stand up and say, I'll be your savior. I'll deliver you. Especially after the attack from the north happens, and the Middle East is not just in chaos, but it is devastated. And if the rapture happens right before or simultaneous with it, or even right after it, just creates that much more confusion and chaos within the rest of the world. Governments are going to crumble. They're going to be incapacitated. The world won't know what hit them. You know, we talk a lot about martial law. You don't have to worry about martial law. It'll be complete. It'll make the riots that we've seen in the last few years look like nothing. Like just a little street fight. It's going to be bad. It'll make all the catastrophes that we've seen in the last 10 years look like nothing when it happens. And it's going to. Listen, if all of this can be written 200 years before it happens and come and be fulfilled this specifically. And we've talked about some other specific prophecies, but this is history, world history laid out that is now already history to us, then it was yet future to even happen. If this is going to happen, if this has happened, and he can be so specific on this and so right dead on with it, then we can trust the rest of what has been told us. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And we can take it literally. These are literal words. These aren't figurative. I'm using some figuration here because I'm talking about our time too and comparing that time to our time and how ripe they were for one world leader to come in and deceive them and take them under control and then break them down. And when it says he replaced even the prince of goodness, where did I see that? Come in like a flood. Oh, the prince of the covenant, verse 22. He replaced the high priest in Israel. He took him out and he put in his own person to be high priest. That's what Antiochus Epiphanes did. That's how he broke the prince of the covenant. That's talking about the high priest in Israel at the time. So it's happened there, and we could say, you know, that was before technology. That was, listen, that was in a world that was the same mindset we have now. Completely immoral. Nothing but want to fight with each other. You can't trust your neighbor. You can't trust anybody. You know, and you have one guy stand up and say, hey, I can put a stop to all this. You can trust me. And then the whole known world finds himself in bondage. And it's going to happen. Antichrist will come on the scene, and we'll see here after verse 35 on, he's going to come on the scene. He's going to be the same kind of thing. Proud, arrogant, we can do this. All you got to do is trust me. Put your faith in me. And before you know it is, I'm your God. Take my mark or die. Bow down and worship me. In 3.5 years, it'll go to that. Everything happens really fast. From here out, everything happens really fast. Let's start with verse 24 again. It says, he shall enter peaceably even to the richest places of the province. Those are speaking of Edom and Moab and Israel and Syria. Those are the wealthiest of the kingdom of that time that was left to him to conquer. Those are the ones he conquered at least first and maintained for himself. And he shall do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers. He shall disperse among them the plunder, spoil, and riches, and he shall devise his plan against the strongholds, but only for a time. So he's changing his tactic. He's making everything look good among the kingdom, but also making it look strong, even though it's not. Verse 25, he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall devise plans against him. Right, so he comes down to go after the king of the south, but when he gets down there, it's not just Egypt, but it's Rome again has shown up to block this takeover. So Rome is more and more in the process of becoming a power again. It says, yes, those who eat of the portion of his delicacies shall destroy him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. So again, he's going to have there's a lot with Antiochus Epiphanes. There's a lot of deceit. There's a lot of what we would call intrigue. There's a lot of inner workings. It's not just the battles. It's not just a king saying, I'm strong, go to battle with another king that says he's strong, and whoever comes out alive is the winner. We're seeing a lot of political moves within his own people, within his own trusted, or I guess maybe not so trusted. They do say you keep your friends close and you keep your enemies closer, and that's kind of part of it. And we've seen this mentality with other people, where they don't trust. And you almost look at this and see, all right, so Antiochus is destroyed from within as much as from without. And if Hitler was watching this and studied this stuff, which he probably did, many people have studied the ancient battles to devise battle plans for modern day battles. And if you look at this and you read that and you catch that, it's no wonder that people like Hitler would, after a great victory, kill off his generals. The very men that brought him the victory, he was so paranoid that they would then try to take over, and the people would love them because they were the great warriors. He would kill them off. And so, it's no one, and he's probably not the only person who did that kind of thing, but all they would have to do is look at this guy and say, oh, he was destroyed from within. So you take that part out. So his own people, his own advisors or whoever, they plan against him and they kill him off. So yes, those who eat of the portion of his delicacies shall destroy him. Again, those who will be closest to him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. Both these kings' hearts shall be bent on evil, and they shall speak lies at the same table. But it shall not prosper, for the end will still be at the appointed time. So now both of these guys think they're the guy. Right? You can look at these guys, and when we look at Antiochus and say that he is the picture of the Antichrist yet to come, you see them sitting at a table, you see them at whatever, negotiations or whatever they're doing to try to gain power, more power one over the other, more influence one over the other. One thinks that they're going to be the world leader. They're going to rule it all. I almost think that they're getting this attitude of, I am invincible. But it says there, the end is not yet. This isn't the appointed time for the end. And so this negotiation comes to nothing. This setting up of one over the other, this setting up of one to be the supreme ruler of the world is not going to happen because it's not the appointed end. God only has ever let people go so far. And then he stops. He doesn't let them go any farther. He lets them rise up. He lets them become a picture of the one yet to come. But he stops. Was Hitler Antichrist? No, he wasn't, obviously not Antichrist. But he certainly was a picture of him. Stalin, Marx, some of the Chinese emperors, these people who killed thousands, sometimes millions of their own people. Certainly the ones that are focused on the Jews and try to take them and wipe them off the face of the earth. All pictures of the Antichrist. John will even tell us in one of his epistles that the spirit of the Antichrist was alive and well. That it was already there. The idea in most men that we can conquer anything, we can do anything, we can set ourselves above everybody. And yet we see world leaders that back down from men. You have men like that. You have a man like that right now. 8 years ago we thought, and you had people saying, oh, Obama's the Antichrist. Well, he's not the Antichrist, man. Listen, if you're a born-again believer in Jesus Christ and you believe in the rapture, you're not going to know who the Antichrist is. You're gone before he's revealed. We went through that in Thessalonians. When we went through 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, we talked about that. So he cannot be revealed until that which restrains is taken out. And the church, under the power and the influence and the filling of the Holy Spirit, restrains evil. So 8 years ago, we thought it was going to be, well, I didn't think it was me, but people were, oh, he's the Antichrist, he's the Antichrist. Look how horrible he is. Look at, everything he wants to do. Everything is against God. It is. But then, you know what? A couple weeks ago or a week ago, whatever it was, he goes and flies to China for some big G whatever meeting it was with the UN. They don't even bring the steps out to his plane. That man had to climb down a ladder. Our president climbed down a ladder to go to the meetings, and he still went to the meetings. That's not the Antichrist. In those meetings, they were calling him all kinds of names, from what I understand, and completely disrespectful to the... That's not. He is not the Antichrist. Putin is not the Antichrist. He doesn't come from the right place. You don't know who he is. Nobody knows who he is. And God won't reveal him until it's time. He won't let the end come until it's time for it to come. But here's the deal. If you are, like me, somebody who believes that the end is very, very near, that this is the last of the last days, you don't have any business sitting around just watching. I love the prophecy updates. I really do. I think we need to know. It's kind of exciting to know that we're that close. But we got no business just sitting back and waiting. You do not want to be sitting in your lawn chair sipping some iced tea when Jesus comes back. Looking for him that way. Kick back in the hammock in your little fenced-in compound with your animals and whatever, your food storage and whatever else. Loaded to the gills. You don't want to be that. That is not what we are called to be. We are called to be the light in this world. And we cannot... Jesus even said, you don't take a light and hide it under a basket. We are to be like a city on a hill that is lit up for the entire world to see. We are to be about our Father's business. We are not to be just sitting still, not doing anything else, not talking to people, playing it safe until he comes, just hanging on, just surviving. That's not who we're called to be. Paul would even tell us in Romans, it's time to wake up. The night is far spent. The darkness is just about done. The light is coming. Get up and be ready. You know? And as attractive as it is and again, you should have some things stored up. Obviously, we live in a tornado place. A tornado can touch down here and you're in a disaster. Power is gone. You should have a generator if you can get a generator. You should have some food and water stored up. Absolutely. I think you should. I don't, but I think you should. But you know what? I got 13 chickens or something like that, and 8 ducks and 2 goats. I'm not going to go hungry. You know, I got a friend down the road I can trade that stuff with for milk. They have a cow. So, I get that. I like that. I like the small farm deal. It's fun. But it can't be who I am. I can't be somebody who's ready to crawl down a hole because bad times are coming. If the Lord tarries and real hard persecution comes, then yeah, I'm not telling you just stand here and wait for him to come and get you. We have brothers and sisters who are refugees because they fled their homes and fled their countries. In the book of Acts, we saw it happen. So I'm not telling you, if they start rushing in, you don't have some kind of plan, you don't have a place to go, you don't seek some safety, some shelter. I'm not telling you that. But don't go hide before they get here. For crying out loud, give them a reason to actually want to come and track you down. Be for Jesus. Declare his name. Spread the gospel. Make disciples. Not to mention the fact that when real persecution comes, the church grows. I don't remember if it was one of the prophecy updates I just watched or if it was one that we watched last time, but he had an article from Egypt, I think. And it was an Iranian lady that was being interviewed in the article. And she said, don't pray for the persecution to stop. That is what's growing the church. Don't pray for it to stop. God's will is working out perfectly. We want his will to work out perfectly. We don't need to be afraid of all of this stuff that's going on. It is his will. It is what the Bible has said is going to happen. And this is proof that we just went through today, and we're not going to finish up chapter 11, but it's proof that because it's history to us now, but what he says is going to happen is going to happen. Let this build your faith. This may not create a new believer, but let this build the faith of the believer. Remember these things. And you don't have to remember dates and names as so much as just remember Daniel chapter 11 is already history to me, written 200 years or plus before those things happened, and they happened exactly the way God said it would happen. Therefore, whoever is standing in front of me and telling me there is no God, whatever their argument is, doesn't hold any water. Don't be fooled. Don't be distracted. Just be ready. Be ready. Let's pray. Lord, I do pray that we are ready in our hearts. Lord, in our minds, that we are set to follow you, to begin today to follow you. Lord, not just to say that we're Christians, not just to remember a day when we confessed our sin and asked you into our heart, but Lord, that we are ready to follow you no matter what, that we're ready to speak of you to everybody that we know. Lord, that we are ready to be in your word so that we know what we're saying. Lord, that we are submitted to the Holy Spirit acting in us and through us. Lord, that we would take all of your word to heart. We would pray every day for the Holy Spirit to fill us, even to convict us of our own sin and our own wrong thoughts and wrong mindset, and be willing when he shows us what needs to be changed to change. Lord, I pray that in these last days that we would follow very hard, very fast after you. That the things of this world would not be great distractions to us. Lord, that we would not be overwhelmed with a need to stockpile, because you are our provider. And Lord, that we would be ready and willing to, that what we do have, we would use to meet the needs of others and to minister to other people. Again, showing your light through our life and our decisions that we make. Lord, may the love with which you love us and the forgiveness that you've given us, may those be the things that we take and we pass out to everyone around us. The love and the grace and the forgiveness that we've experienced with you. Lord, may we hear your voice every day. In Jesus' name, amen.